you know, what Elon is doing with Neuralink, a chip in your brain.
And you're aligned with that?
Personally, philosophically, no.
Okay. So leadership is not about position anymore. It's really about taking agency of your own independent thinking, decision-making in times of uncertainty. Do you think the education system right now is failing?
Absolutely.
In what way? So welcome.
Thank you.
Really great to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
I woke up this morning on the sound of rain. And I don't know why, don't ask me why, but it just brings me back to my childhood. Every time I just can smell the grass after the rain, I can remember all these memories about being outdoor, walking, swimming. I don't know, our childhood was so much outdoors. What does your childhood look like, if you can remember right now? You're younger, so I'm sure.
Yeah. And deceptively, by the way, I look a lot younger than I am. I'm 29. So I was luckily, and I'm very grateful for this, a child not of the digital age. I grew up without screens. I grew up in the outdoors, playing, exploring, would leave in the start of the day and then come back at the end of the day, and had a blast, and I think that's sort of missing in today's generation, and that's something that I wish continues. It's just screens are so addicting, right?
So
for
you were
everyone.
one of the lucky ones.
I was one of the last few lucky
Yeah.
ones in my opinion.
So you're a millennial?
I'm a millennial.
Okay,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
you're the last generation who really, grew up with before the internet
Yes.
somehow.
Somehow,
Right?
roughly, yeah.
What about Generation Z? This generation that I hear, I read a lot about how they were affected so much by what you just said, the screen, social media, that in many ways they missed on the real life, these parts that we're talking about. What do you think of that?
I don't think they miss it so much.
Mm.
And I really, just sharing my experience. So I have, some Gen Zers who are now almost 20, 21, right?
I think Gen Z starts 97 to
97 onwards.
2012.
Right. So there's some of them that are on the older end now,
Yes.
right? And when they look back, and some of them grew up in the social media age and whatnot, they don't really, see that, oh, we missed out a lot on going out. They remember, oh, the good old days of gaming together, or I remember when we played this together, or when we met online together. And so I don't think they really know what they've missed out on. I don't know. I'm a bit old school in my thinking and my
No, I agree. I mean,
yeah.
how can you really miss something if you really don't know
You didn't
about it, or
experience
you
it.
didn't experience
Yeah.
any of it? But that brings me also to the question that, again, it's many studies that have been done on Gen Z, assumptions about Gen Z. We're talking about Gen Z because they're kind of the younger leaders that are coming into the market right now. And there's a lot of assumptions about them being with very high anxiety, very high expectations. They are not realistic, lazy. What do you think of that? What do you think of these assumptions? I want to put them as assumptions because, I think we still need to understand so much about them, right?
That's the right word. It is to try and understand them. I don't. I'll be very open, even though I'm closer to that generation. I think, yes, you're right. There is a big shift in sort of priorities, and because of that, anxieties, because the world is not sort of built in that way. And I think Gen Z has a lot to do in terms of adapting, and the world has a lot to do in terms of adapting to them, right? And that's what we're sort of getting into with gig economy and sort of consumer patterns, and how businesses are adapting, subscription models. And I think, it's a big problem that we'll have to, solve for the future.
Do you think that what we're experiencing right now in the world out there, because I don't know if you can sense that, but certainly I can sense that, which is a world really full of uncertainties that we are in right now.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way?
Completely. So the word is VUCA, right?
Yes.
That we hear a lot in business school. I've heard you mention it as well. I worked for the government of Dubai for about 5 years, and then now I'm running the family business. In my short career span of, let's say, around 7 to 8 years, so much has changed, right? And it's only getting faster and more uncertain and more crazy. I mean, this year we've had so many geopolitical things, right, that have happened that have sort of disrupted everything. And so now being a business leader, running an organization with so many employees and having to take decisions, I'm actually like, feeling that. Before I used to study and read about that. And it's just such an interesting dynamic to be on the other side of it and experience it and try and manage it and think of strategies and, risk assessments on how to, work around it.
You just mentioned that you worked in Diwa
Yes, I did.
for maybe 4 years. What did you take out of those 4 years that you are applying right now? What do you feel that system working in Diwa? But you worked in R&D,
I
right?
did. So you and me are from the same field, technically.
Yes,
Academia, a little bit. I
yes,
published a
yes,
couple of
yes.
papers and I enjoyed it a little bit. But that's a very good question. I'm an engineer, and I always joke, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I'm the only idiot who studied engineering. And I thoroughly enjoy it because today I find that is one of my strengths, where I can, understand and speak the technical language. And I also can understand and speak the business side of things. And I thoroughly enjoy both. And what I learned, and again, coming back why I thought your book was fantastic, is I learned about myself. I learned what my strengths are. I learned that I can be the bridge. I learned that I can speak the language of both worlds. And I learned that I don't really belong only in one world, right? Like in that world. And so it was very insightful for me to learn about myself.
I think what I'm curious about is when you were at Diwa, I think you were focused on analytical research and all that. And nowadays, I don't know if you're aware, but these are what we call the knowledge workers. And in today's uncertain world, the knowledge workers are kind of in danger. Why? Because of the technology, AI taking over, machines taking over. So in many ways, you have 1 billion workers, white collar workers, who are going to be forced to reattune their capabilities to be more suited to today's world, uncertain world, VUCA world, right? So in many ways, they need to transcend from a knowledge worker to a knowledge mindful leader. And a leader has many, many, many definitions. Leadership has many, many definitions. But again, going back to your entrepreneur experience right now, what does leadership mean to you in today's world, uncertain world?
For me, I think it comes down to just one thing. How many more leaders did you create? That's
I love
it.
that.
It's that simple, because that gets all the definitions in the picture, according to me. And that's what I repeat a lot to my team, is that, think of the position you want to have, think of the people you want to empower, and that's what makes you a leader. The biggest strength in today's world would be adaptability, right? That's what Darwin says, right? Like the strongest species is not the one that's the species that survives is not the strongest. It's the one that adapts the best. I think Yuval Noah Harari talks about it as well in his book, when in Homo Deus, when he says AI will be everywhere and the strongest will adapt. And so when it comes down to leadership as well, I think adaptability is something that is key.
I think through the knowledge, through the lens of knowledge mindfulness, there's a big shift right now because of the VUCA world and what we call the perfect storm. You have a poly crisis between climate change, geopolitical changes, diseases, new diseases coming, technologies, all that. They really kind of form what we call the perfect storm. So in many ways, we kind of look at learning, leadership as interconnected. So that's where I think it's like a trifocal lens of we can never look at anything in isolation anymore. So in terms of leadership, there's hidden interconnections between leadership and learning, the new learning, we call it even. That's why I really touch on the knowledge worker, because they were trained for stable environments, stable organization.
Absolutely.
So much with linear ways of thinking. Most of the business schools study leadership as a standalone discipline. And in many ways, in today's uncertain world, this is where the integrative approach of things comes, the system thinking, the living system thinking comes into the equation. So that's why I think I would like your opinion again about how do you see yourself leading today's younger generations? In, let's say, I can't even say in 5 years, I want to, even in 2 years, 1 year, how do you see, what are the capabilities, what are the competencies that you feel you need to kind of adapt to or upskill yourself with?
In my position, I find it so interesting to try and manage the dichotomy between working in a legacy family business and dealing with, let's say people who've been there since inception, almost 20 odd years, and the newer generation that's coming in and, who have a completely different skill set, a completely different, set of priorities. And it is extremely challenging, especially as someone second generation and as an aspiring leader, to come in and try and address that. Um, I can't say I've cracked it yet. I don't think most people have. I don't think society has in general. But what I can tell you is that um, it boils down to fundamentals of finding out what each person wants, right? And of course, we can sort of box it and say this generation on average wants this, but it boils down to the individuals, in my opinion. And so the first thing is, just listening, is
It's a great
just
start.
just talking with them and saying, hey, how can I help you? And what are your priorities? And to understand. Otherwise, making a blanket decision without really understanding the underlying motivations, incentives. And the second thing is, of course, trying to find something that works for both parties, right? There's always where, although even if we're millennial, even though if we're Gen Z or even a baby boomer, human beings are still human beings, right? There's some things that we all like and that we all, sort of can agree on. And maybe it's a bit simplistic, but that's sort of my approach to things, is that, hey, what can work for you and me? And it's a negotiation. It's one of my favorite things at the end of the day.
Deloitte did a survey in 2025, and they found that 89% of Gen Z, what they need is a purposeful work.
Oh, yeah.
Purpose is a big, big, big part of their job satisfaction.
Absolutely.
So how are you going to
Work on that? That's
Yes.
a fantastic question. And it's actually in my pitch, usually, when I talk to some of these younger people. I say, hey, I think, you know what, just give it a try. And when you spend time with a child, for context, we're in the education business, right? So we have primary schools, preschools, nursery chains all across UAE and the UK. And I just tell them, you're contributing to someone's life, right? You're shaping their future. If you really want to get philosophical, you're actually shaping society, because that's tomorrow's leader. That's tomorrow's astronaut. That's tomorrow's teacher. That's tomorrow's, educator or scientist. And so I always say that. And sometimes I get a, oh wow. Sometimes I get a skeptical look back. And on average, I can say it is such a rewarding field to be in. Yes, it is very tough. Yes, education in general doesn't pay as well as consulting or private banking, but it is very rewarding. And if you're optimizing for that metric, which is meaning, I would say there's a lot of it there.
Okay, let's go back to the new learning, which is what you're talking about, the education system. Do you think the education system right now is failing?
Absolutely.
In what way?
We've just been following what we've been doing since sort of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
And I think the priority or the requirement was very different at the time. And today, with so much changing, of course, the priority and requirement is very different. And we've recognized this, even from the early years, which, by the way, 90% of your brain develops before the age of 5. And many people don't know this. And so people think, oh, he's young, he's 3 years old, he's just going to eat, he's going to sleep, he's going to play. There's nothing going on. Absolutely not. Leila, your personality, your, tendencies or extroversion or introversion, your likes, your dislikes, almost all of it was, cemented in those early years. And that's why they call the formative years. And so it's extremely important. And so we thought, hey, we're in this position, being one of the largest players here in the UAE. Um, what can we do? We just completely revamped the curriculum in the early years. I mean, we followed British curriculum, which is the EYFS, but we also added project-based learning, a curiosity approach, sort of the Montessori things that are already there. And we, fused everything and made sort of our own curriculum. And at its core, it's about, you know, questioning and curiosity and adaptability. And sort of we thought that it aligns best with what society would need and children would need going forward in the future, is to adapt and be agile, right?
You were talking about knowing yourself and how that is a very important component.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think of integrating that into the curriculum for the younger people?
This was actually the brainchild of my sister around 5 years ago as well, where she said, all schools and all education is always focused on just one metric, IQ. And there's almost nothing on EQ and knowing yourself.
Yeah.
And today, the requirement of the world is not just about how intellectually gifted you are, right?
Yes.
In fact, leadership has a lot of EQ, and people say social quotient and communication quotient. There's all metrics. But yeah, EQ is a whole part that's completely forgotten. How you deal with people. You could be a fantastic engineer or banker, but that doesn't make you a good leader. And so EQ is something that we need to look at. And what she did is she developed, and I'm very proud to say this for my sister and my mother, two fantastic, incredibly dynamic women. She developed a whole mindfulness and EQ curriculum for the early years, and we were the first nursery chain over here to launch it. And today she's done well because she's also tried to inculcate it, and she's got a couple of schools following it. And today, KHTA, which is the governing body over here, also includes some mindfulness and EQ curriculum as a requirement in academic plans before starting new centers. So we're very happy and proud to have contributed.
I think that's amazing. Maybe, fast forward 4 or 5 years now, I'm not promoting knowledge mindfulness, but knowledge mindfulness comes into the play in terms of the we space,
Yes.
the we intelligence. So yes, mindfulness is all about me and knowing myself and, focusing internally. But again, in uncertain world like this, we need each other. In the last 50 years, especially, of course, with all the linear ways of thinking, there's an emphasis on the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why even leadership was about, the characteristic of a leader and his attributes and attitudes. Through knowledge mindfulness, we look at leadership as a quality relationship. And it's what you were saying, is really about the quality of relationship that you build with yourself and others. Others could be human and non-human. So how do you create that kind of nurturing culture that breeds more leaders into your company? So leadership is not about position anymore. It's really about taking agency of your own independent thinking, decision making in times of uncertainty in many ways. So that brings me to the difference between mindfulness and knowledge mindfulness, because mindfulness really focuses on the me and focuses on going inside and knowing yourself and all that. But I always felt the missing part was, how do we bridge between the me and the we? That's where knowledge mindfulness came into play. So we need to talk about how do we integrate that into, the schools probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about executive education? You talked about, younger generations and all that. And I could see you're very much interested in executive education, going to
Absolutely.
Harvard, MIT, Singularity University. What are 3 things that you feel you took out of this in the last year, for instance, that you can share with the audience?
It's one of the biggest cliches that people say, lifelong learning. You need to continue learning always. Learning doesn't stop once you graduate university. It's a cliche for a reason, right? It is the single most rewarding thing, and probably it's changed my life in so many ways, because a lot of the decisions I took post some of these executive education programs. especially Harvard. I would call that the epitome of exec ed. I'm a bit biased in that regard.
What makes it so special?
I think the fact that that there's no right answer, that you have to just think critically and not just answer a question. You have to think and value perspectives and actually listen to, your peers. And you hear and the fact that the teacher is not really teaching, right? The teacher is just facilitating the professor. And you hear such dynamic different perspectives and you think, "Ah, I never thought of that," or, "Oh, that's an interesting take." And that's how you learn. And that's how you question, and that's how you debate. And that's how society really should be, in my opinion. And so I'm just a big fan of the case-based methodology at Harvard. And I think in terms of the three takeaways, the first one is, and again, when it comes back to Harvard, is they say a lot, your job as CEO or leader is just two things. Just boils down to two things: is build the right teams and ask the right questions. That's it, you know? And I sort of resonate to that because it is very much a we versus a me, right? What's right or wrong with your company or your organization is right or wrong with you. Your company is a reflection of you. I'm a firm believer in that. And the second thing is actually by a professor, uh, Arthur Brooks. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Happiness.
Happiness, yeah, exactly. I really like the simplicity of it, where he said happiness boils down to four things, right? The first thing is you need to have some sort it's the four F's that he calls it, I think. Faith. It doesn't need to be, spiritual. It doesn't need to be, it could be philosophical, could be uh, something larger than you, right? It could be your country, could be patriotism, could be faith is the first thing. Family is very important, family, friends, like sort of a community, right? Purpose, right? And he just said workout, like some sort of exercise. That's it. That's all the four things that it takes, and that really stuck with me in terms of, what people should be doing as a society is sleeping well, eating right, making better decisions, and,
But
yeah.
making better decisions is a tricky part in
Very,
uncertain
yeah.
times
Yes.
because I think in uncertain time there's a lot of ambiguity. So it's again maybe the metaphor of a perfect storm. So when you have really the storm, there's so foggy you can't see. And this is, I think, what I feel the learnings that you were talking about at Harvard or MIT or all of these institutions, I feel in a way they are still talking about critical thinking, fragmentation. But when you have a very uncertain conditions and there's not enough data, so how are you going to decide what's your next step? Even if it was a baby step, what is it going to be? This is where knowledge mindfulness comes into play about the integration, the holistic picture, zooming out and trying to look at all the parts together. And in many ways, when you talk about case study, I totally respect the different points of view, the different perspectives, because that really brings you to the point you were talking about. There's no right and wrong answer because this is your point of view. This is your assumption. This is how you are thinking of all this. And as much as I think I'm intelligent and smart, there is a limit, there's a narrow window that I can see through. And if we can put those windows together, then we can see much more clearer. Me, you, X and Y is much better view than just me alone or you alone. So in many ways, I don't know about how much they're teaching that and how much they're integrating that into their new curriculum, because I still can see that there's a bit of fragmentation on the ground. Like you said, we're still not there. We're still trying to figure it out. But I feel this is kind of a bit of a missing part. There's a lot of talk about leaders having good judgment, right? And I think it's easy to talk about good judgment, ethical responsibility, system thinking. Again, beautiful labels, but they're so fragmented. So
Absolutely.
the question comes, where do we start? How do we put all this together? And this is, I think, a question I'll,
Mm.
ask you. What do you think? Where can you start in all this?
It's a big question. You're absolutely right. There are too many silos, and there's not enough of an integrative approach.
Mhm.
And so, how do you start approaching things with an integrative philosophy, right?
Yes.
Especially in education.
Mhm.
Well, you start doing things multidisciplinary, right? For example, I told you my story was
Yes.
I'm like, okay, I felt a fish out of water in just the technical engineering because I'm like, no, you need to talk about the sales and the execution and, all the other side of things and the business side of things. And then in the business world, I felt, it's a bit too wishy-washy. Like, no, you need to
Yes.
talk about hardcore numbers and, engineering facts and first principles. Um, and so in terms of education and delivery of sort of that, those principles in a very uncertain world, I don't think we'll find the perfect step. I don't think we'll find the perfect strategy. I think we need to start and sort of figure it out along the way, make mistakes, and work on integrating different fields that we think will be important in the future. How do you inculcate, the psychological side of things in this? How do you manage people in this? Because the most common complexity is always comes down to just us, right?
Yes.
The human brain is the most complicated object we found in the universe so far, and so understanding people and consumer behavior and patterns, and I think
But do you think that's the reason why many organizations are opting to use
I
algorithms
think so.
for at least the entry level jobs?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I don't just think it. I've seen it. I've heard it. I'm in the YPO community. Uh, dealing with people from different industries, different backgrounds. They're all talking about what can we do to always streamline and find um, things that can be made more efficient.
Mm.
And unfortunately, I'm not too happy about it. But the way it's going with AI, there's a lot of jobs that could very much be done by the AI, and
Like what? Which jobs?
mostly the entry level stuff, like you spoke about. I mean, like graphic design. I mean, there's a lot of them actually.
I
Yeah,
mean, they're
yeah.
talking
The
about,
accountants, the legals, everything. So,
yeah, even
uh,
engineering,
engineering,
lawyers,
research,
doctors,
research,
surgeons. I
surgeons.
think Elon Musk the other day was saying in 3 years there won't be one surgeon on Earth.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's going to be all robotics.
The technology is possible today already. So
So, what's going to happen to human beings? What's going to
that's
happen to Gen Z? What's going to happen? What do you think? I mean, how can you imagine the future?
that's $1 million question, right? And I just don't see any other way besides UBI, right? Like universal basic income, where or some form of it. Like, I mean, I'm fast forwarding. I mean, it's a bit sci-fi to think about, but that's the reality we live in now, right? What happens when you have a large majority of the world that needs employment, and you look at a lot of these governments that start talking about their metric is how many jobs did we create and
Hmm.
whatnot, and then you have this technology completely chainsawing all job
Yes,
opportunities
true.
away. So what happens? You start to have a largely in the masses an unemployment class of
Yeah.
people unemployed, and what do they do?
What does that leave the human being? What's their competitive edge, you think?
I'll answer that kind of cheekily by diverting to what Yuval Noah Harari says, who's a much brighter mind than me, I would say, is that humanity won't be humanity. I feel it'll evolve into what he calls Homo Deus, right? We're Homo sapiens right now, but we'll evolve with the AI. We'll probably augment into some sort of, what Elon is doing with Neuralink, a chip in your
And
brain.
you're
Yeah.
aligned with that?
Personally, philosophically, no,
Okay.
not at all. I think
Because why? Why aren't you aligned?
I'm a bit of a traditionalist, I would say, knowing myself.
So if we can't do that, how can we do it in our own spaces, let's say? So in your own space, how
Yeah.
would you protect that in your company? How would you anchor the human in the age of AI?
So what we do is we we just did a talent show. It sounds stupid, but as small as that is what makes someone someone. right? Knowing thyself is what every major philosopher or spiritual leader or whoever would speak about. Is the first thing is know yourself. What makes you
Human.
you? Yeah, or human. And I think looking at that is beautiful, and having a platform as leaders, as part of a company, that's the best we can do, right? Is to give people a platform to demonstrate themselves and to enjoy the moment and be in the moment, right? As much
Yes.
as possible.
So you want to bring your organization to life
Mhm.
with having more humans than machines.
Yeah.
I think this is where the new leadership comes to play.
Oh yeah.
And this is where the values, going back to traditions, values, ethical responsibility, all those human traits that we kind of forgot for a
Mhm.
long time. They never taught us that in business schools, right? You kind of, looked at one side of the story. But I think it goes back to what you're saying. I think the future belongs to
Mhm.
leaders who can synthesize, who can connect the dots, but also who can synchronize and harmonize, right, in many ways. So, how are you going to be able to do that? Is
Mhm.
what you were saying.
Mhm.
Start with yourself, but then create that space where you can, invite others by role modeling, kind of, so
Absolutely.
much of what we're talking about. I don't know if I can say I'm optimistic or hopeful. I would go with hopeful,
It's
maybe,
a better word.
because I don't know. What's the difference, in your opinion, between hope and optimism?
What comes to mind is the movie Shawshank Redemption. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
One of the best of all time. And they really look at this. The key theme of the movie is hope. And there's a sort of a dichotomy that hope can be a dangerous thing. And I'm of the opinion, and sort of the other camp is it's liberating
Yeah.
in that it's sort of, you hope and you let go. And so I would see hope and optimism on the same side, sort of the coin. But usually optimism is kind of construed as naive oftentimes. And so I would like to think as hope as something pure.
I
Yeah.
like that. It aligns with what I feel about hope. I think hope for me comes from within, from
Yes.
that side of faith that you were talking about,
Yes. Yes.
because I think it's the anchor that we kind of hold to when things get messy, when
Hmm.
things get so uncertain, unpredictable, out of control. And I feel when things get out of control, this is where humans get fearful. This is where fear creeps in.
You're right.
And to kind of what goes to what you were saying about emotional control, about being calm under pressure, not to break, I
Hmm.
think that's where the hope comes as an
Super powerful.
anchor, right?
Yeah.
I think I would like to really, really focus on your expertise right
Hmm.
now in terms of when we talk about the new learning, new leadership. The last part I think that I want to touch upon is the new living successfully. What
Hmm.
does success mean in today's changing world for you?
I would say success is very personal, number one.
Mhm.
And for me personally, I think success is meeting my goals as a start, and being a good person, of course, contributing and giving back. Um, and so, yeah, I have my goals. I have my metrics of what I would like to be. And they're a bit, very businessy, let's just say, because that's where I am in my life. But I'd like to share an experience. My sister is very into mindfulness, and she recommended I do something called the Vipassana. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a 10-day sort of meditation retreat, um, and I would recommend everyone do it once because you learn about yourself, right? You learn about when you just, I mean, don't have your phone, and you're in a, let's say, retreat, and you're not really talking, and you're just trying to go within, which sounds all philosophical. But even if you just do it at home
Mhm.
without your phone for a day, you'll see your mind starting to go crazy, right? Like you get a million thoughts a second. And what I learned on day 6, let's say, of this 10-day silence and
Mhm.
non-phone retreat is, what thoughts am I carrying, right? Like what matters to me. And I found that a very interesting experience, and especially as a leader, right? Like again, know thyself is the one of the biggest KPIs I think that every leader should have. And I'm not saying I know myself completely, but that sort of experience helped. And so coming back to the question of what success means to me, I think it's changed a lot over the years, and I'm sure it will continue to change
Yeah.
going forward. As of this moment, I have uh, several targets that I've set for myself. I'm very particular on that. But if you're talking about from a philosophical point of view, or just in general for humanity, it boils down to what people have been saying for ages, which is be kind, be good, contribute to something bigger than yourself. And I'm sure meaning and happiness are along the way, right? As we discussed.
I think I want to go just for a second about your experience of silence.
Mhm.
And I totally believe that total disconnection is very valuable as much as connection.
Mhm.
But I also want to emphasize, as much as silence is very valuable in today's noisy world,
Oh yeah.
I think knowledge mindfulness is about the song,
Mm.
not the silence. It's about orchestrating all the pieces that comes out with the harmony, with that tune of a song at the end. That's where I think knowledge mindfulness comes into play.
Beautifully said.
I would leave the last question for you. If you would ask me any question about knowledge mindfulness, what would that be?
I saw your story as to why you thought of it, and I very much related to it. Uh, working in academia and then seeing, there's something not really there over here. But my question to you would be, how best and what's a starting point? What's the level zero of inculcating a framework like knowledge mindfulness into your life?
I think for me, number one is to try to be as realistic as possible about where I stand now and where do I want to go. That is kind of the first point that I always start my conversation with, because it changes the whole perspective of any challenge, any problem, any opportunity, in terms of how do you convert that into a question? What do I know and don't know about this situation? So starting with that makes it very much neutralized in many ways, with less emotion, less
Mm.
attachment, less fogginess about all that. And I think this is where the lens of knowledge mindfulness comes into play, because this concept really is about harmonizing. It's about, yes, the importance of certain abilities like synthesizing, but the direction that we want is really about synchronizing harmony, cohesion between ourselves, connection with ourselves, connection with the people, the quality of connections we have and relationships, but also the quality of relations we have with non-humans. Again, it's about really understanding the interconnection between knowing, being, and doing
Mm.
as a concert together. And this is where it brings us to the living system thinking. And I think it all started by feeling there's a gap, there's a void, because knowledge management for many, many years, 20 years till now, many people think of this field in terms of, bringing the right knowledge to the right people at the right time for greater performance. In knowledge mindfulness, we look at performance and we look at trust. We want to build that together, because performance without trust, like you see nowadays, and trust without performance doesn't mean anything. So how do you bring those two together in ways that will bring that harmony and less conflict to the world we're living in right now? So we just hope that people will realize that they do need to up level their abilities to see the relationship between information, knowledge, wisdom, and unity. Once you see that, you can utilize it better. You can't utilize anything that you really can't be aware of. So
Mm.
we are hoping that this is going to be our path going forward. Thank you so, so much for
Thank you.
joining us today. I really, really learned so much. And I hope, we'll maybe in 1 year we'll bring you back here to see what happened with your knowing, being, doing through the lens of knowledge mindfulness.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a great time, great conversation, and I learned a lot as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.